want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
I wanna, 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 I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig ah, zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig a zig ah. Zig a zig ah, zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig a zig ah. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
I wanna, 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 I wanna really, really, really wanna zig a zig ah, zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig, zig a zig, zig a zig a zig ah, zig a zig a zig ah.
Hello and welcome to Comic Sex Games 2021. I'm Len, the Executive Director of Hand-Eye Society, an arts and video game organization that focuses on serving the game Curious. We're located in Toronto, the place in the water where the trees are standing, and occupy the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many other Indigenous peoples, as well as both welcome and unwelcomed guests. Comic Sex Games is a celebration not only of video games and comics, but also the intersections and cross-collaborations of different artists, developers, and creators in between. We're so excited to announce 5 games that were made in collaboration between games and comics artists for our Comic Sex Game Jam: Bell Book Subscribe, B-Sides, The Faceless City, Farewell Format, and Miss You Love. Check them out alongside the exhibitors throughout the week. Thank you so much for joining us for this event. I want to thank everyone who's been involved in the project over the past 5 months, as well as our fantastic moderators and volunteers. You can learn more about Hand-Eye Society by following us on Twitter at Hand-Eye Society, as well as subscribing to our newsletter. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you at the end of it.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Amanda Wong, and I am the Director of Partnerships and Fund Development at the Hand-Eye Society. I would like to thank Ontario Creates for making Comic Sex Games a reality, especially for the support in making our event online amidst this pandemic. I'd also like to thank our studio sponsors for contributing to the return of the Comic Sex Games Jam this year. Viewers will have a chance to see what some of these studios have been up to throughout the stream. Please go check out Clever Endeavor, Phantom Compass, Flowweaver, and Laundry Bear Games when you have a chance. Lastly, I want to give our team a huge shout out for making Comic Sex Games happen online, along with the support of our volunteers and volunteer coordinators, Anna Kim and Sam Cuddy. Please enjoy the stream.
Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Sparks, Director of Technology at the Hand-Eye Society and Production Coordinator of the online platform that currently hosts TCAF, Canzine, and Comic Sex Games for this online super festival. Thank you for coming to this online event that my colleagues and I spent so much time putting together. I won't take up too much more of your time, but we'll be running Comic Sex Games events featuring many speakers and games every day this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitch to be alerted when we go live, and you can find out more about the Hand-Eye Society at handeyeSociety.com. You can also attend this online festival at the link below, which is brokenpencil.com/TCAF, to see TCAF, Canzine, and Comic Sex Games exhibitors and jammers. Don't forget that this event goes from May 8th to May 15th, so keep an eye on us. A huge thank you to everybody who's been involved in this project, including our participants, our team, and our sponsors. As well, thank you for being our supporters. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to my team, including Len Predko, Brendan Lehman, Amanda Wong, Royale Edwards, Aaron Demeter, Phil Slyhoff, and Jillian Bleckenhorst, who all played a part in making this possible. Well, that's enough for me. Let's get our game on, and I hope you enjoy Comic Sex Games.
We came back to the farm supply store again. The packaging said, if animals could talk, they'd ask for this brand. When I told Denise, she didn't think it was funny. We stood together in the checkout line. The cashier asked us if we were cat breeders. I froze. I couldn't answer them. Denise lied and made small talk as if this were all normal. We sat in silence in the truck as we drove home. It was a long drive. I thought about the fact that we had traveled all of this distance to get medical supplies meant for animals, and this was all that we had. A question formed in my mind. Denise, are we subhuman? I asked her. For just one moment, I caught Denise's face looking off guard. Then she answered, yeah, we are. Aurel, your problem is that what you think's happening to you is some sad, tragic thing, but it's not. That's what you don't get. It's normal. I told her it wasn't normal. She responded, not having trauma is abnormal. If you haven't been raped or homeless or had some sort of massive trauma, then you would be weird. The only reason it seems abnormal is that the successful trans people, the ones who survive, get to tell their stories, get to control the narrative. The ones like us, we die in silence or we move on and try to forget. I told her it wasn't true what she was saying. She replied, do you know any trans people who are okay? I mean, really okay. I guess that's the moment that I started seeing myself as subhuman.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Lena and I'm really excited to be talking to you today. I'm an artist and illustrator currently graduating from OCAD, so right now I am living and working and speaking to you from land that is home to Indigenous nations, which include the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. I also want to thank the Hand-Eye Society and Toronto Comic Arts Festival for holding this event. I feel really grateful for the opportunity to speak about one of my great passions in life, which is fan comics. So to give you a bit of background, I have been making and independently distributing zines since I was 15. And at the same time, I became interested in game development through a game development club at my high school and started participating in game jams. So I would say I dabble at an amateur level in games and have a little more fluency in comics, but I love both media and the different ways they tell stories by playing with the relationship between image and text, interactivity, and time. I think it's also important for me to note that many of these observations and statements are produced from my own personal experiences in fan spaces and creating fan works. So, that being said, if there's anything you want to chat about, you agree with me about something, disagree about something, please let me know in the chat if you're watching live, or you can shoot me an email if you prefer that instead. I am always really curious to hear what you're obsessed with and what your relationship to games and fan culture is. Okay, let's get started. So, what does it mean to be a fan? Even though I was a big fangirl as a youth of not only video games, but also like anime, cartoons, comics, you name it, I find it kind of difficult to get a clear picture of the way fan culture has influenced my life and the way I love things. And this is because it sometimes feels like every experience I had with narrative media was highly personal and specific, almost like me as a person and the media property itself had forged like a special relationship with each other. And in interpreting the work a certain way, it almost was like I was letting that story see into a part of my life. It felt very personal to me. Of course, I also love talking to other people about the things I was obsessed with, and that joy that we would share together. And it made me happy in some ways to know that I wasn't the only one who saw or had been seen by this game or movie or TV series or whatever it was. But at the same time, I almost also felt like it was mutually understood that while we are talking about the same game or the same show, we're both fans of the same thing. Me and maybe another person who's also really into this game or TV show were like seeing and reading into different things. So what's beautiful about a narrative is that the diverse identities and life experiences of that group of fans will bring out different parts and different details of the story. And what's so beautiful about a game specifically is that this difference is really evident in the media itself. You're literally controlling the behavior of the player in the game. In a lot of narrative work, there's like multiple endings too. So everyone's quote unquote journey in a game is necessarily different by virtue of that like level of interactivity. So with that being said, I think that being a fan actually comes with a certain level of alienation. So obviously there's the community that builds from a collective love for something, especially now that we're all interconnected via the internet. You don't even need to be local anymore. But there's also some alienation you feel because of like your personal relationship to the work, along with feeling alienation from that culture at large or from the people in your real and immediate life. And I think the reason why this alienation is felt so strongly is because what stories do, and especially games, is that they build you a new reality to live in. Like games throw you into a whole new world that you feel like you've like built your home in and that you have real life stakes in. So in some sense, games and other media works transposing their worlds onto how you experience reality is already extensively discussed and well documented, which completely makes sense, given that games are designed keeping in mind how we might naturally interact with our real life environment. So why wouldn't that relationship kind of be reciprocal? Like, why wouldn't those worlds build off of each other? Game transfer phenomena was coined by Angelica Oritz and Gotari Mark Griffiths, who found that there was academic documentation dating back to 1993 of how people couldn't get songs, symbols, colors, motions from games out of their head even when they were no longer playing. And it's kind of this extension of the Tetris effect where those colorful Tetris blocks continue to like twist and fall and stack up in your vision even when you're not playing the game. So if this is just happening with like just surface level UI, lights and sounds, and like artificial things like that, then I do also wonder how the deeper elements of the games, with like fully fleshed out worlds and narratives, change the way we are present in the world, or even change the way we experience memory. So I can think of times where I've lost myself so completely in a game that like I'm in some fucked up haze, sort of struggling to return to reality afterwards and like reintegrate into society. It really does feel like crawling out of the womb because interactive narrative work can immerse you so fully into the worlds they've created and generate emotional investment very deeply and very quickly through its mechanics. Um, so I guess one way of thinking about it is it's kind of like being in a really intensely dependent monogamous relationship that is also really brief because it colors everything you see and do outside of that relationship. And you always think about things outside of that relationship in relation to what you've experienced inside it. And that makes you feel weird because you might feel like you're the only person who understands what it's like to be like really immersed in this game world. Um, I also think it's difficult to talk about how fandom is experienced and stigmatized without talking about gender and sexuality. So I'm really curious to hear what your experiences may be. But personally, I've noticed that you can draw a gender line between the different ways people experience and express devotion to a certain fan group. Um, so when we think of obsession and fixation, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is like K-pop stans or like 2010 era believers or directioners or like geishas, or something else that conjures up feminine obsession as like a self-consuming frivolous ordeal. The obsession is not driven by competition or some kind of promise of material gain or conquest, which are things often associated with cis hetero masculine obsession. So in this case, if we are not obsessing towards some kind of leverage, or some kind of power, then what are we doing it for? In fact, because of the gender stigma around fandom and obsession, coupled with the fact that being completely devoted to something can feel alienating, there is some shame associated with expressing our love for some static, self-contained narrative. How can you be in love with something that isn't real? I mean, a video game can't really love you back. So maybe that's what's so alienating about fandom, is that our love is mediated by a personal and visceral fantasy. Creating fan work is a way of making that fantasy public and known so that you can be like, see, I don't look so crazy anymore. Like, this is how it feels to be in love with something. I would argue that some forms of fan work function to prove that there is a logic behind this like intense emotional reaction. It brings the context of the game or the media property back into the world that we share, and allows readers to be empathetic in that way. There are, of course, other reasons to make fan work, and everybody has their own. I'm just graduating from art school, so I feel like in that sphere, making fan work is something viewed as corny. The university is an extension of this general Western ideology in some sense, an ideology of artwork that is rooted in championing originality and looks down upon the derivative. But I really think that work that is explicitly derivative or that builds upon pre-existing work is adding to the conversation and lifespan of that original in like a really beautiful way. So fan work could be conceived of also as an object to add to a collective shrine, like a fandom is building or producing something together, and fan work is one form of that community building. Um, keep in mind that while my theories for why we love to create fan work are largely just wild speculation, I like to think that I have some firsthand experience in the matter. Fanzines and fan comics are a form of fan work that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to be spending the rest of my time talking about how they operate and why they're so great, and just some little things I've noticed about some of my favorite pieces. So I want to briefly first discuss my process. Flowers Look Like Weeds was the first proper fanzine I made, and I can speak a little to why I made it. I worked on it over the course of about 2 weeks, right when quarantine started about a year ago, and it stemmed from a collection of observations about both a relationship that I had recently ended and the relationship I had with casual farming adjacent games like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley. I guess I saw the visual language of how these, well, I guess I saw the visual language of these games, and that they could be used as vessels for like personal thoughts. And that's kind of how I approached the creation of this zine. So most pages in the zine feature this avatar who represents me in some ways, and the continuity between images would phase between the visual languages of Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley, and like reality. So in doing this, I think that I was trying to speak in two different ways. I wanted to speak to why doing these like silly, soothing, repetitive games or playing these games represents so much to us. But I think I also wanted to use these games to help me and kind of act as a guideline for how I could process something I didn't fully understand. And when everything feels meaningless, it kind of helps to have this simulated reality present you with like a pre-existing narrative and set of tasks to accomplish every day. You know, you complete something, you get a reward. Like it can be really comforting in that way. And I wanted to depict that in my work. So in addition to connecting yourself with a larger community and changing the life and meaning of the original game, I think that the practice of producing fan work can be used as a kind of divination, like to make sense of personal experiences that seem random or confusing or painful, because making a story that directly responds to the game narrative imbues our memory of both playing the game and our real life experiences with something special. It's a form of reflective work that can reshape our memories in that way. And that's a real show of faith in that original game that is really lovely to see and experience. So I think I've talked enough about my creator side of fan comics. Now I want to talk a little about some notable fan comics that are responses or homages to video games, or use the video game almost as like the theoretical framework for the narrative. And there are lots of fanzines that are like art books or image collections for fan work, but I want to focus on narrative fanzines that were generated by one author because I think they have something to tell us about how we chronicle our personal lives into stories as well, though not all of them are autobiographical. Plus, I think a narrative framework is interesting because it sort of mirrors the narrative inherently present in games. Since game narratives are built through interactions over time, comics can mirror this form using panels to build like a time-based sequence. So that's interesting to think about as well. So the first comic I want to talk about is called Letters to an Absent Father by Mare Odomo. And this is one of the first zines I ever got my paws on. I think my brother gave this to me after buying it from TCAF in like 2011 or something. The style is really simple, really chill, and the strips are short. It's a Pokemon fanzine, though not explicitly branded as one. I'm not sure if any of the ones that I'm talking about are explicitly branded as fanzines, but they count. The game mechanics of Pokemon itself are like really simple and repetitive, and it's about collecting animals. And the anime follows this similar sort of formula from what I can recall. The main narrative of Pokemon is to beat all the gym leaders, collect all the Pokemon, and be the best in the world, which is pretty simple, But what Mario Odomo decides to dive into, interrogate, flesh out, explore, are the pre-existing narrative details about this franchise that the franchise seems to treat as natural, unquestioned, like given facts about the world. But the biggest narrative question that is never answered is, where is Ash Ketchum's dad? Then Mario Odomo asks the other questions that would naturally follow, like, how does Ash feel about that? Is that the reason why Ash is traveling the world? Is it normal for him to travel the world if he's just a kid? Like, treating that in like a very serious way and like kind of respecting that plot element of Pokemon. And I really love the zine because it's simultaneously poignant and tongue-in-cheek. And I find that 3-panel strips can fall flat or be too quickly digested. And I suppose it's ultimately kind of a silly zine. But I think Letters to an Absent Father really treats Ash's internal emotional life very seriously and like with a lot of tenderness. So the zine accomplishes this with some simple choices that make a pretty big impact. Like, for example, the narration is written from his perspective with really plain language, and it kind of lets the images contrast that narration by displaying little glimpses of detail in the more omniscient perspective. For example, the narration in this strip is simple and broad, but it's about how they're paired with the images and the reader being able to draw that connection that makes us understand Ash's thought process so well. And it's in those little details of the image where you can also tell Odomo brought a lot of love and imagination into this world. Like in this panel, the little visual details like the Psyduck camouflaging as a rock in the water are great. And it adds to the tender tone of the zine, not only towards Ash, but like towards the Pokemon franchise. So something I've also noticed is that the zine uses the contrast of sadness and humor really well to complicate an otherwise simple narrative. For example, like in in this strip, it's like he's asking some very sad questions, but in the last panel of this strip, he kind of has like a really silly crying face, but like the rest of it is totally serious. So it kind of like plays with that push and pull or that tension of like humor and sadness really, really well. There's also the contrast of like a simply bubbly art style or the associated goofiness of the original franchise also comes into it. And that contrasts with the somewhat classically depressing premise of the zine, which is Letters to an Absent Father. So there are multiple layers of contrast in both the humor and also the content, and that makes the sad part sadder and the happy parts of the comic like more joyous. Yeah, it's just great because it builds so much emotional depth with such simple ingredients. And there's also the framework of letter writing from a single person, because you never know if the letters are reciprocated or even sent. So reading this when I was like 12 years old or whatever really affected me because I always wanted to seek out resolution. Like I always wanted to be there to be like the end, or to have like an epilogue to explain everything. I think that's like the natural instinct that a lot of kids have, is they're curious to know how things are resolved. And I feel like a part of growing older is like being able to let go of that and trust that things will resolve themselves, or be at peace with the fact that some things will never resolve. And this comic handles that in a really beautiful way too. In the sense that like, in some ways, this zine is opening up the story of Pokemon again and breaking it away from a resolution. It acknowledges the viewer or the player's itch of wondering what happens to Ash's father without actually scratching it. You know what I mean? The next zine I want to talk about is Pond Smelt by Jane Mai. This comic was originally published by Piao Studio, but I'm counting it as a fanzine because it was one of the first books they ever published, I think. They were founded in 2012 and Pond Smelt was published in 2013. So it very much looks, feels, and functions like a zine. So Pond Smelt is an Animal Crossing fanzine. I originally became a Jane Mai fan through her book Sunday in the Park with Boys, which was published by Koyama Press here in Toronto. Something I've always really loved about her work is how she uses her persona as a character in personal stories. And it makes us consider the relationship between the character in the story and the author of the story. Like it makes us consider like the real life author who created it and how they're depicting themselves, which I think always adds like an interesting layer to how we read. Mai here is making evident the specificity of her experience with Animal Crossing by generating a full character and personality from the in-game villager avatar she used in her game. And I think that's the greatest appeal of this fanzine. Like, while she played the game, there was clearly a narrative developing in her head using the in-game NPCs as sort of puppets and the game itself as like a dollhouse. So it really feels gratifying to see that new story like just completely translated into comic form as its like own independent piece. So like for example, Pond Smelt imagines Lobo as an outsider to the village because of his wolf pack's like nomadic lifestyle and the relationship between these different wolves, when in the actual game it's like multiple villagers will have the same personality because they're all like programmed by type, but she kind of like imbues this whole character and backstory into her favorite villager, which is really awesome. And it also builds on this mechanic in Animal Crossing that animal villagers can leave or get shuffled around, even if you really want them to stay. And this is like a source of tension in Pond Smelt as well. And she's really good at playing up the precarious drama of that fact. So when the zine was actually published, I had never played the game and like I had never played Animal Crossing, but now that I'm flipping through the digital edition after having played it, there are like so many wonderful details to find. For example, the way villagers hoard the fish you give them inside their home is a programming quirk or something that Pond Smelt transforms into a plot point about Lobo's avoidant personality, which you can see on this page. And the way Jane Mai's persona or avatar is drawn also seems unique. In stark contrast to the other villagers, she seems more realistically rendered. There's some like dimensional texture in her hair and eyes. Her facial proportions aren't as flat or exaggerated. And I've also like always found that Animal Crossing games kind of have this strange lilt to them because there are no other human characters other than the player. Like, it feels self-aware in that sense because the only human is like the autonomous player-controlled avatar. So in some ways, I think that Pond Smelt like heightens this uncanny rift, and it opens up that darkness in this sweet and comforting game that's like designed for kids or whatever, and is able to like kind of pull it into that darker place by bringing out that element of alienation that was always present under the surface, like in the design of the game, which is again super cool. Yeah, those are those are my favorite parts about Pond Smelt. And finally, I want to talk about the comic Lara Croft Was My Family by Carta Monir. So this piece was published digitally through the Zeal Project. I'm not sure if they're still active, but they crowdfunded interesting critical writing and comics about video games. And Carta Monir makes like such incredible work and is and this is like one of my old favorites of hers. It's autobiographical and talks about a family, which I mean her family, and how they played like Tomb Raider together in tandem with exploring the damage caused by a controlling and abusive father. So the story gets darker and darker as you read. The main narrative is told in brief vignettes with no narration, interspersed with like frames from Tomb Raider. And Lara Croft acts as a proxy for the women the father controlled, literally because he was always the one behind the controller playing the game. Meanwhile, the other members of the family are like invested in Lara Croft's tribulations and successes. It's interesting because when you play a game like Tomb Raider, you can't always succeed the first time. Like, they're designed so you have to die and then learn how to improve. And Lara Croft Was My Family holds a magnifying glass to this process of watching an avatar of a woman that you're controlling die and get hurt over and over again on screen. Because that is literally what's happening, but we're kind of desensitized to it. And Monier is really good at like pulling that into the real world and like examining that element of the game from like a real world perspective. And in one way, it is painful and frustrating to see such an obvious reflection of your failure, of like the player's inability to like advance the game or win the game. But in another way, there can be something very satisfying about seeing like your personal, emotional, or psychological pain manifest as physical pain on screen. Kind of gives like a voice to what you're feeling. And Monier's illustrating multiple perspectives at work here. There's the father who attempts to force the avatar to do his bidding. The avatar that might represent the mother is punished when she fails to perform his will. And then there's the onlookers, who are the children, and they are not empowered to stop the cycle, but have no choice but to watch it unfold in front of them and as it happens to them. So you could say that seeing this dynamic of control happen via Lara Croft as proxy gives a certain language to the abuse that occurred. And I also really think that the way this comic represents time is effective. Like, the comic deals with some really heavy themes of trauma, but that representation never actually feels heavy-handed. And I think it's because each moment of the story is very brief, accompanied by no narration, and it's like scattered throughout years and years of life. It's a super effective way of showing how harm and the memory of harm manifests even years after the fact, or how it like continues to manifest like in your life, I guess, and how it changes if it does change. And we're the ones who are left, like we as readers are left to connect the gaps in time in the same way that the children by the end of the story are left to reckon with what happened to them. And the way that the story is told in these like flashes of moments feels similar to how the narrator remembers moments of Lara Croft's adventure through time. And by extension, how we as players might remember significant moments of the game. So these brief snapshots really suit the subject matter and really treat the subject matter in like a beautiful and respectful way. And ultimately, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier. Like, why do we feel compelled to make fan work? This comic really successfully makes meaning and significance from experiences that might be painful to recall or seem meaningless and confusing. So the power we give games to imbue meaning, resolution, or ask new questions of distressing memories is a really valuable element of generating a narrative response like this comic. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I really love these 3 comic works, and you can buy or access all of them online if you're interested. Being able to see into someone else's relationship with a game that you are familiar with adds, I think, a whole new dimension to how I remember that original work. And I think fanzines are a tool that we can use to reshape our experiences and change the way that we remember and play games. And ultimately can also just be like a source of pleasure and fulfillment. So thank you all so much for listening. If you have any other narrative fanzine recommendations, or if you have thoughts on why you like to make narrative fan work, please send all of that my way. Take care and happy reading.
Hi, my name is Efahan Elbi. I am the writer and director of In Cold Dark. This is made by Done Undone, which is me and my wonderful team. This is our baby, and we're so excited to share it with you. In Cold Dark is a narrative, story-based game. I was torn a little bit how to present this to you guys. It's a very chill game. It's very much about reading, patience, choice. So I decided just for the shortest run through of our demo, which is currently out, you can play it yourself at incolddark.com/play. Please, I invite you to play it. I'd be so excited. I'm going to try not to talk too much, but also explain some of the choices behind it. So without further ado, here is In Cold Dark. In Cold Dark opens with a memory, I guess a dream sequence. Your friend Kiraya and a long time ago connection of yours, who obviously was very important. It's the first introduction to the core concept of the game, which is the idea of choice, but choice without, I guess, what I would put as exclamation points over every single one. Our life is full of choices every day, and the theory of the game, sort of the initial inception as to why I began the project at all, was obviously to create a story and tell a story, but also to give the player the idea and the experience of choosing almost by every action or every interaction. Your connection to Kiraya is obviously highlighted here, but the choices you make do matter. I'm always a little torn how much to speak on it, because obviously every good game is a mystery box and I would love you to discover it yourself. But what you choose will affect the experiences of what you hear and what you see quite significantly, with a lot more intended once we're past the demo phase. We're still building the game. But all of them matter. And the sort of emotional nuance of conversations also matter as well as you go through. In Cold Dark is inspired by a lot of games along this genre. Games like Oxenfree, Firewatch, the sort of calmer wander games and stories. But every year, it's now been about 3 years of work on the game, and I think it's becoming a little more of its own thing every time, and I'm really happy about that. The style of the game itself is based on my experience as an illustrator and just my severe love for pixel art all through the years. My teammate Miguel has been working like crazy to create sets and beautiful, beautiful things. The characters are often my design. This particular path has a little bit more of my assets in it, but every scene has been touched by everyone, and honestly, I couldn't be more proud of pretty much every frame of the game so far. Obviously, everything is not final. I'm sure we'll find new ways to sort of work through things and improve everything. But at its core, it's sort of based in I don't know if I would call the space or the sort of presentation of space realistic, but certainly it's comic booky, or rather painterly, and I can't wait for you to see it. This is your AI companion Spark, who has been with you the entire journey. You spent 3 years out on the rim on your own, doing a job for a company called Distant Star, scouting new planets and bringing the information back. Spark is getting a little bit detuned, as you can tell, and that makes Spark more sassy and a little insulting at times. But also, obviously, there is a bond here that has developed, and Spark's been your companion forever. Again, one of the internal battles that I have with presenting it is to sort of whether or not to explain the sheer amount of variance in every playthrough. From the get-go, In Cold Dark is designed to be played multiple times. The reason for that is actually a core part of the design. It's the inspiration for it was sort of in the minor choices that we make every day, and they're sometimes vast impacts on our lives. Sometimes we make big life-changing choices, and they obviously have a huge impact on what happens, but oftentimes also our day-to-day matters. And in the span of this game, which is it's not an open world game, you can't wander anywhere you want. There is a momentum to the story and a story to be told. But the concept is that no path really curves back on itself. The world is bigger every day that we work on it, but also the idea that it is a world left to explore in a way that can't be done in real life. You can choose, and you will choose, and your priorities will determine what's important to you, and you will experience a very particular version of this world. And you can come back and try it again, and try something completely different this time, and see a different angle that you would never have arrived at. The point is, it should never curve back and become sort of a full loop, so it's the same experience over and over. So this ship is, your time here in the cockpit is one of the first times you're actually able to make a choice that has an impact on the remainder of the game that is different every time. So there's actually a few different activities, more to come hopefully too, but the idea of there's a chance to think about your home and reminisce. Since your trip is now ending, you're headed back towards home again to Sagi 499, which is a recently colonized section of the galaxy. You can sort of think on what you've left behind and what you might be returning to. There's your work. There's that figurine leads you to a TV show that you can catch up on you haven't seen in a while. There are books to read with. There's a lot of content. One of the most exciting ones, and the ones that I am picking this time around, is the ability to navigate your own self back. So Adam has designed up a beautiful navigation game that you will see, and I think in a way it becomes a microcosm of the overall experience. But this is one moment where you make a choice, and you'll be doing this activity during your off moments throughout this journey, and you can try something else next time and get a little bit of the world, or just ignore the world building if you want. It's your choice. So this first version of the nav is the most complex you can run into at first, because this is actually your trip back from the distant rim. It's random, so the intent is that it's definitely one of the more difficult, and this embodies the rest of the game's ethos in one place, in the idea that you can try to take this challenge on yourself, and it is possible to win, to make it to the end goal. But also you can also ask Spark to do it for you, and obviously Spark has the benefit of a computer processor to sort of tackle all these paths at once. What I love about it is neither path is wrong, and there's actually a separate pleasure and joy in doing both. The solving it yourself will give you one reaction, and also maybe some options unlocked down the way. Obviously your skills are rising at doing this kind of navigation. Alternatively, pressing the robo button there is actually very satisfying. I love the crap out of it, because it's just a great pleasure to watch. You know, Spark does all of these paths at one go, and the one that finally lands is always a surprise to me. I actually am in love with it. So this is a good example of sort of, you have options. None of them are going to end you or end your experience. You can decide to let Spark do it, and you're probably not going to hear the end of it, because Spark will just hold it against you the next time. But it's your choice. Honestly, I'm in love with this whole thing. This is the name entry based on obviously a beautiful DOS-like interface, because I am a giant nerd and I love it to death. So we'll put an Effie. space always seems to have a sort of a contemplative quality to it, in the sense that sort of these big open spaces and vast dimensions. In this case, this is the first sort of choice that, this is sort of the core decision about a great many others. This is where the story branches into sort of three different moral directions. And I don't use morality in the sense of good and bad. Obviously, there are good and bad morals, I do believe, but in this sense of the priorities that the player will find on their way through this adventure. So there's obviously a momentum to life. We have direction and intention and history, and your character has them as well, though you discover them slowly. But you just finished a huge job, and one of the big priorities could be to go and get your money, because you've earned it and you spent all this time. You might have other reasons for having dodged out of the galaxy for a while, or rather Saji 499, the sector, but you deserve your pay, and that's definitely your key momentum. In this demo, you can't go get the pay yet because we haven't built it, but there's a few other paths you can go to, and actually that's because Ryko is such a large hub that there's a lot more stories that kind of build from there. So that's still in production. Just building those sets now, and they're beautiful. I can't wait to share them. Maybe I'll put in a screenshot here too so you can see it. So this is one of the first things that kind of happens where you have just returned and you are alerted by Spark about an incoming message, and this is a choice to make at this point. It's your friend Kiraya, and she is contacting you with some urgency. So there's a little bit of intrigue with Spark here that plays out, but also the idea that this is now another option. You obviously want to go get your money, or you want to continue on the current momentum of your life, but this sounds important, and it might be important to you. Is it worth exploring? I guess you'll be the one to decide. The very final sort of branch of this initial set of, options plays itself out now, where you already know Spark is a little bit unbalanced, but something very strange occurs. Spark has no awareness of this happening, so there's something else going on. Some sort of a signal has been found. This is the sort of top piece of a larger mystery throughout the entire experience. But again, it creates another choice for you, where there's a possibility of sort of exploring the unknown and following a mystery wherever it might lead. And who doesn't love a good mystery? We all love mysteries. One of my personal preferences in this experience, and obviously it's not meant for every experience, this is in this particular game, is that the UI, I'm trying to keep it to a minimum. I love the idea of exploring these visuals, of letting the player sort of discover points. Obviously, inspiration from a lot of the old LucasArts point-and-click games, and any game that has been inspired by and developed that beautiful genre since. This is definitely one of those moments where this map was made first, so I feel like eventually I'll come back and change it up and try something new. We will build something different. But here, so for example, there's this signal that has popped up on the map. Spark is acting really, really weird about it. Maybe doesn't even know it exists, but kind of knows it exists. There's something up here. So this is a side mystery that you can choose to follow. It's not a wrong choice, and again, I can't express how much, because this is the shortest playthrough. This one lands at just a little bit below half an hour. In some of our plays of the demo, I've seen folks play for 2 hours, a little longer. It really depends how much you decide to read, what you choose to do, what you choose to engage with. This path is one of my favorite for this demo in the sense of the visuals, but every one of them is different. Some have a lot more social engagement and meeting new people and deciding whether or not you want to meet new people. But this signal is definitely a core mystery, and I'm honestly so excited to hear what all of you find when you start to play and experience it for yourself, and particularly when the whole experience is all together and the full story can be, experienced play by play. There's a particular thrill, too, in my friend Sebastian's beautiful tunes. This path has a bit more of other tunes, including some of my own, but there are whole segments which are just created with his dulcet synth. It's such an honor to have that kind of work inside of an experience like this, and I think it's one of the things that makes a game so beautiful, that it can be a mix of visuals, of storytelling, of writing, and of music, and it all comes together to create a unique experience that can't be emulated anywhere else, not in any other medium. So it's just really exciting. Yeah, I love that. And it calls you a quitter. There are some sort of story journeys through here that are just full of social interaction and in a way management, like our lives have. There's people to meet and your own reactions to them. You as a player can decide if these people are people you're interested in speaking with or not, or you can sort of slough them off. These all have impact on where the story takes you. This path is particularly lonesome, or in the sense of it being very much you and Spark. I love, personally, I love sort of building these worlds, and I love the sort of depth of Spark in some ways. This Spark is having an issue here, obviously a giant issue. So to sort of navigate through the issue, switches to Side Spark, which is sort of a side AI that kind of avoids the complications of the big one. But again, this sort of shows the choice levels that we're intending. The idea of the signal that you find, and you can decide, how to engage with it, how you feel. Do you want to, once you have the signal collected, you can choose to stay, or you can choose to go and chase it, as you'll see in a second. A little haunting. So we're going to chase, is what we're going to do. Coming from the world of illustration and animation, I'm a very interdisciplinary artist. I love all kinds of mediums. I think games are so special, though. There is something in the way of being able to build these worlds, whether they are, simple pixels, painted, 3D. I mean, each of these requires a different sort of focus, and all of them are difficult to put together. The idea of making these sort of interactive worlds is something I can't get over. This is my favorite path visually because I just love these things. I love these paintings and the way that they sort of come to life in motion, and being able to sort of create this box where you can look around and experience them. I mean, I'm consistently in love with this. I think it's just such a cool way to experience a story. And I think what's so thrilling about game design in general is that this is the way that I would approach sort of the concept. And each one of my teammates, Adam and Migs and Seb, they all bring something different to this experience, and it would not exist the way it does without them and without sort of the ideas we bring to it. And every person would make this differently, So this is a bit of a tourism of the sector of new places that maybe people haven't even seen. But here you get to experience a comet, and each one of these will take you through a place that may actually have relevance to the plot later on as well. But right now you're in the middle of a chase, so you have, obviously there's an urgency to keep going. This path never puts you inside the ship, and many paths do put you inside the ship or inside other ships or places. So it's, again, the idea that you can never really quite know exactly what's waiting for you. There isn't a cookie cutter, and part of the excitement for me and for us as creators is that figuring out some of that experience as we go. Obviously there's a whole story path that's taken some years to build, but there's, how it plays out in games, you find out right away if it's any fun or not. And I just, that part of the process is just can't be sped up. You have to just have to experience it through. This place has quite a bit of relevance, but you won't get to spend much time in it because you're still on the chase. Since one of the core aspects of Inkwell Dark is the idea of no wasted play, that you can go through the game and experience the story and experience a different part later, there is also an element of replay and a continuity between plays. This is a huge aspect for me as the creator, because I really enjoy when you get to sort of frolic in a world and see it from all kinds of perspectives, and also not feel like you've squandered time, because really none of us squander time. Nothing you do in this life is a waste of your time. It's just a choice. Uh-oh, Spark's back, and Spark's got something for you to do. Can't be great. So even though Spark is, at this point, obviously overrun by something taking control and has brought you here to this place, there is still a part of Spark that wants to help you, and so sends out a distress signal on your behalf so that maybe you might get saved. This is the place where your path ends, as you can tell by the length of this video and what's left. But every play is a different length, and this one I love because it has an element of you really don't know what's out there. Obviously, we have a good sense of what's out there. We usually know, but there's something about this that can't be explained just yet. But not this time. This is at each of the end of the demos. Obviously, it's only a part of the experience, a small part, but they all finish with something sort of different and a special moment. This is the first hint with Kiraya that perhaps it may not be Kiraya that you're talking to in this memory. To be continued. And that's the end. And what can I say, honestly? I'm so thrilled to share this with you. Thank you so much for watching this experience with me and experiencing our very hard work. I'm sure you have your own things like this, and it's such a joy to be able to share it. This is, as mentioned, the point of this experience is to be played again. And so one of the aspects is to invite the player to sort of try one more time. I can't really describe to you how much changes every play, even in this initial sort of demo phase. There's a lot of variance, and please come to the Discord for Hand Eye Society. Tell us what you think about the experience, what you experience yourself. If you like it, any thoughts, we'd love to hear. This has been a passion project for a while, and there's lots left to do, but it's honestly just a thrill to be able to share it with you. Once you complete your experience, as you can see, the game does sort of a traditional reset. But the very first thing it does is invites you to play again. So please do. And like I mentioned, if it isn't in a link somewhere, incolddark.com/play. Come and experience it for yourself. I would be thrilled to know. If you get a chance, follow us on Instagram, follow us on, or come join the Discord if you like. Find us on itch.io. This experience is still being built, but we're really excited for you to try it out and, experience the latest version. So thank you again very much from the whole team. Stay safe.
Hey everyone! Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you're having a good time with us for Comics X Games 2021. We are done for today, but we will be back throughout the week of May 8th to 15th. Check out our website at handaisociety.com for our full schedule and follow us at Handai Society for live updates. See ya!